Hello, it's Zoe, and welcome back to the show. A question for you this week is, what are the trends affecting behavior in the workplace? The difficult behaviors, I mean. And how do you go about dealing with those difficult behaviors? Let's find out. On the Planet Human this week, I've been thinking about digital twins. In fact, I got a pitch for a guest to want to come on the show, and she said that she runs all these different teaching programs with her digital twin. I thought, well, that's interesting. And I clicked on one of the little videos, and there she was presenting information, looked completely natural and pretty normal. I thought, well, what does this mean for us? What could this mean? And what it could mean is that this will make life a lot easier, for example, because it takes quite a lot of effort to put together video. I know, because I'm doing this every week. And what if I just have my digital twin? I just drafted up the content, got my digital twin to present it. Sounds sensible, time effective, but it speaks to a bigger question that I think is going to be an emerging trend. And it's something we haven't solved yet, which is how do we prove our humanity? We got the whole deep fake issue that's associated with digital twins. But if we declare upfront, this is my digital twin, it's amazing how much people accept that as like, okay, I get that it's not really Zoe speaking. It is a digital avatar, and yet it's her words. And so we can forgive her or make allowances for her in that we know that part of her is there, but it's not really her part. But how do we prove that we're actually humans? Because if the digital twins get so good that we can't tell the difference, this is a problem. So proving humanity is something that we're going to have to resolve into the future on Planet Human. On Planet Zoe, it's all about the Olympus Rising book launch. It is coming soon to you. You need to get onto my website at zoerouth.com and sign up for the podcast to get first notification there. Just click on podcast and you'll get the first access to when the book actually launches at a special rate where you can get a signed copy and some other cool bonuses, as well as discounts on the ebook when it launches. So yeah, Olympus Rising, the fourth book in the Gaia Enterprises series. And there's a lot that happens in this particular book. There is a lot of chaos. There's a lot of action. And there's some sad stuff that happens, some hopeful stuff that happens. And really, it's an exploration of leadership under pressure in a grander political, ecological context and how we might navigate that. So it's how I'm exploring the future of leadership in narrative form, which is exciting. I'm hoping. Get yourself a copy. What if we had a map of power and the human territory of power? How might we build better teams and better organizations? This is the central question I've been asking in the research and drafting of my next book, Power Games. And we do, in fact, have a map. I've generated one. And it looks at, part of the book looks at the 4 spheres of power. And it's useful to have a map like this so we can actually start talking about power, which is one of the things that we don't do well at all. We kind of had this corrupted view of power because we believe that power corrupts. And yes, while it is true that power can corrupt, we can actually develop a better relationship with power. So the 4 spheres of power we look at, the first one is the cauldron of courage. This is your personal power. This is your generative power. This is, imagine a big giant cauldron with all of your experiences and accomplishments in it. It's the fire in your belly. It's the call to action that you can generate. And when we cultivate that, we can actually have quite a lot of personal agency. And when people feel powerless, they forget that they actually do have a lot of agency. So harnessing and developing and stoking our cauldron of courage is the first step in maximizing the use of power effectively in the 4 spheres of power. The second sphere is called your coins. Imagine like a medieval bag of coins. That's what I like to think of. And in that is the accumulation of all of your achievements and status. So coins is about how we build status. Some status is unearned, meaning you didn't have to personally do anything to get it. And it might be because you were born to a certain family in a certain time in a particular country, and you have a lot of wealth and education, all these things that you didn't personally achieve. That's unearned status. And then you have status that you is earned and granted to you by others through the things that you contribute to your particular team or community. You're granted esteem, or maybe it's elevation in other people's minds because of the efforts you put into your job. This is actually more passive power because we can't necessarily determine how people look at us, even though we can do things to represent it. So our status comes with us, and if we have a larger status, a larger bag of coins, we can be more influential. The third sphere of power is the what I call conch, your voice, if you like. And this is about influence, and it has three elements to it. It's about your relationships and connections. It is about your actual message, and it's also about your charisma, how you show up and interact with others. And we can develop the skills of that. This is a very active power. And it's the precursor to gaining the fourth sphere of power, which is the crown, or authority. When we have official authority, official power, we can make decisions on behalf of others. We can command others to take actions. We can co-opt resources. We can claim different privileges. So those are the four spheres of power, and they can be developed in a healthy way, and they can be definitely abused. And in the book Power Games, we look at what tips people into doing power games and not using power in a productive, healthy, collaborative, inclusive way, something that we want to avoid. And also what happens when we show up and we have to deal with someone who is playing power games. All right, that's the four spheres of power. If we had a map and a way of talking about power, that's really helpful. What you can do right now is help somebody else develop their power, remind them of their agency, help them see what they can accomplish, and encourage them to develop courage to take action and to speak up for themselves and to be more visible. All right, get into it. It's tea time in the office kitchen, and my guest today is Brenda Neckvatal. And she is quite an amazing lady. She is a best-selling author of 2 books. She is an expert in human dynamics and crisis management. And she has had a wealth of experience working with Fortune 500 companies around the world. And we get into the nitty-gritty of difficult behaviors and some tactical things we can do to address some of the pushback and challenging interactions that we might have with others. Without further ado, here she is. Here's Brenda. It's time for tea time, tea talk, tea time in the office kitchen. And my guest today is Brenda Neckvatal. Welcome.
Hey, thank you very much. You nailed it. With enthusiasm.
Yes, with enthusiasm and with practice. That's always helpful. And all the way from Virginia Beach. Now, for those of us who are on the other side of the planet, where is Virginia Beach?
So we're right in the middle of the East Coast of the United States. So
Okay.
we're in the state of Virginia, right above North Carolina, just below Maryland and Pennsylvania.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for helping us geolocate you on the
No
planet.
problem. No problem. I'm just glad you didn't do it with a dart.
Oh,
We're good.
geez.
Like
No,
a dart on
then
the map.
we'd end
Yeah.
up in Antarctica, I think. So our conversation topic today is dealing with difficult behaviors, which no one has challenges with in the workplace.
No, not at all.
Not at all. It is a chronic issue. And when I was reading your bio, I love this little piece that you had in there. It says, you've been known as the Grim Reaper. I'm like, well, that sounds enlivening as somebody who's in charge of people. How did you get that moniker?
So I use it as a joke because most people view HR professionals as like the no people, like the individuals that just don't make the day happen. And when you've got as much experience as I have, like my background in HR is literally having a seat at the table to work with leadership to figure out how to grow and expand the business. So I joke about that, and everybody seems to get it. And I used to actually, one of my jobs I used to work at, we had an HR director that the only time we would ever see her is when when somebody was getting fired. So they had nicknamed her the Grim Reaper. And it's odd because that's what a lot of people actually view HR as, is just, the hatchet person, right? The person
Yeah.
that's set to do all the dirty work. And that's not everything that we do. But unfortunately, that's, a lot of folks have that impression about HR folks. So I
Well,
joke about it. It gets a good laugh every time I say it.
oh, yeah, it totally does. And
Yeah.
it is one of the more challenging parts of
Yeah.
HR, I'm guessing. Not having been in a full blown HR role myself, though, having been in a role where I did hire and fire and train people, I have a little inkling about what that's like. When
Yeah.
you're tasked with dealing with these difficult issues, and they don't always result in firings, what
No.
are the difficult behavior patterns that you've seen in the workplace that are common to leaders?
The ones that I see that are more common now than ever have been before, one of them is this sense of entitlement that has been kind of bubbling up. And like I know and I attribute that innocently to technology.
Really?
Um, I do. And technology, this thing, which we all know and love, um, has done so many amazing things for us. I mean, I've never seen one device literally cancel out a bunch of different devices from your alarm clock to your flashlight to your Polaroid camera. I mean, it's just amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all in one spot. And on the flip side is that it has also erode certain life skills that we've had. So I'm going to take a stab. You and I are from the same generation. We're probably Gen Xers, right? I know I am.
What?
And I grew up in an environment where if you had an issue with somebody, you had a conversation about it.
Yep.
This thing allows people to hide behind technology and not come forward and have those conversations. So, one is that technology, as great as it is to help us be more productive, has given people an outlet to kind of hide behind the things that they don't want to do, having the conversations with people they don't want to have. Not everybody, but quite a few people. Then the other piece of it is that, again, being of when a friend of mine refers to us as the veterans of Earth, I told him to go stuff it. I said, go veteran this. But when we had to, like, if we had to do library reports or we had to do research for school, we'd
Mm-hmm.
have to go to the library. We pulled out this drawer called an index. We had to know the Dewey Decimal System, right?
Yep.
It took a while for us to get to the information,
Yep.
right? When we got it, then we spent 10 cents per copy in the library to photocopy the pages so that we could only simply have them refer back to because we couldn't take some of the books out with us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now you hit two buttons and you get instant access. So that kind of takes away, I mean, we get dopamine hits by being on our cell phones all the time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we've consolidated time, which is really great. But at the same time, and especially now that we've got Chat GPT on the it's like people don't even kind of even have to do their own work. I mean, they can rely on technology to actually help pull stuff forward. So as great as technology is, it's also a contributor to what I believe is entitlement. Now, there's some other things that happen with entitlement. I think that the nuclear family, the lack of a nuclear family, has contributed to that. Families aren't sitting down having conversations at the dinner table anymore. There are more. I was helping somebody today do some research, and it is really amazing how many, I mean, there's 15 million single mothers in the United States alone.
50 million.
15 million.
Oh,
Yeah.
15, 1 5. Okay. Yeah.
15, one
Wow.
five. Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So, there are certain things that just the way life in the world is shifting, that I think that there's some values of the world that have also gone with it, right? And so entitlements tends to bubble up as a result of that.
How does that join the dots for me, please, Brenda? Because I'm a little confused. If people aren't sitting around the table doing conversations and they have all these devices that can give them access to information more quickly and don't have to work for it like we did in our generation, how does that turn into entitlement? Like maybe we need to define what the behavior is of entitlement. Is that like expecting everything to be handed to you on a silver platter?
I think some people expect to, I think what happens is that what comes with entitlement and technology is that, for instance, a younger generation may expect the hiring process to be drastically shorter than
Okay.
what it actually is.
Okay.
Okay. And because of technology and the fact that they can get to information faster, that sometimes there is a lack of patience to get through a process, which can therefore possibly even lead to somebody becoming with the mindset that, listen, I've worked hard, or I've worked what I think is hard, but yet the alignment of what the company expects is hard, is different, right? Because it's just like, it's no different than somebody who believes that
Mhm.
they have done an exceptional job when, quite frankly, a company can observe the person and they've only done just the basics, just the minimum, or what has simply been expected, right? There's a lot of folks that they feel that the work that they've done, they've met the expectation of the job. That doesn't mean that they've gone above and beyond. So they kind of flow together a little bit. It's just, I've just seen it as a shift of doing this a long time and watching how things have just changed. And the only conclusion that I can come to is that our cultural norms are changing along with technology. And
Mm.
those things kind of merged together has influenced. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a hard line. And then, the family dynamic has changed too. So we've just seen a shift in cultural norms. We've seen a shift in technology. We've seen a shift in leadership. We've seen a shift in how we communicate with one another. Like, all those things start adding up.
Tell me a little bit more about the shift in leadership, please, Brenda. My ears pricked up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, no, no, no. So so I grew up in a blue collar town.
Yep.
My first job was, I was literally told under no uncertain terms, and most of my classmates, we all had the similar experience. It was, this is how you do the job. This is what we expect you to do. We expect you to be on time. We had all these expectations. I mean, you should have seen my sixth grade teacher. It was hilarious. That was like our first day in her English class was, this is my stapler. This is my Kleenex box. This is my chalkboard. She was like laying expectations across the field, terrified us, right? It was hilarious and turned out to be one of the most amazing teachers I've ever had. But um and we were also told that if you don't like doing this job, there's the door. Don't let it hit you on the way out. So that therefore set the expectation that we now know what is expected of us. If we don't like it, it's our choice to stay. And there is nobody that is going to make us feel good about it. I mean, we had a job to do it. And if you want to be accepted and if you want to continue doing the job, do the job that's required, right? So we had this set of expectations that were set for us. Now, again, remember, that's a blue collar town, highly industrial town, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was our culture. That was a norm, and it's very safe to say that somebody growing up in Erie, Pennsylvania, like I did, had a very different experience from probably growing up in a place like New York City or like Tucson, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
We just have all these different subcultures, right? So that was our subculture. Our subculture was that we were taught at a very young age, take care of your stuff, pay your bills, period. Right?
Yep.
No one's going to pull you out of this. It is all on you. And that's what we were taught. And now we've got families, and I'm not saying any of this is bad by any stretch of the means, but our kids don't get that same kind of lesson. They get, mom and dad can support. Here's how we're going to nurture, right? It's just a different world, right? That's what I'm referring to. So when you look at leadership, when you have individuals that are from my background who have a very straightforward way of communicating, setting expectations, and then we've had, the millennial generation come up, we've had Gen Z come up, two totally different perspectives on what the ideal workplace would look like. Well, guess
Mm-hmm.
what? That's when we start crossing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So leadership, as boomers have moved out, Gen X has risen. Now we have millennials who are coming up. So millennials, folks, like, the one thing that I've learned in HR is that millennials know that they can outsource human resources.
Mm-hmm.
They don't truly fully understand everything that it does.
Okay. You mean millennial
Millennial leaders,
bosses.
millennial
Okay.
leaders, right?
Right.
So the early millennial leaders were the ones that kind of taught us that collaboration is strong, right? Within their generation.
Mm-hmm.
Like they worked very well in groups. There was a lot of question about, like, let's innovate, let's innovate, let's innovate. They were very much about innovation, and they were coming up alongside the Xers like myself, who are very much like, this is the standard, this is the expectation. Like, we're not looking at innovation. We know the path forward. This is the job, right?
Mm.
So we understood the challenges of leading people because we were taught by boomers.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you have a group that started to, and I had experience with this, so I can say this by firsthand, but I had a couple of employees that were from the millennial generation that pushed back from that conventional teaching of these are the challenges that we're here today. They're like, well, let's collaborate. Now, when as they're here, they're now faced with the exact same challenges that we were working on teaching. So they're getting some hard lessons that way. But at the same time, we also learned about collaboration in a completely different manner, right? We
Mm-hmm.
learned about what people want. Sometimes leaders just need employees to focus in and get the job done. We don't always have room to be able to say, let's innovate. Because no matter what, you still have to deliver on promise to your customers.
Mm.
So it's change. There's nothing wrong with change. There's nothing wrong with innovation. There's nothing wrong with collaboration. But all that has in a time and a place. And if it's not directed at making sure that what we're doing is delivering to the customer on promise, then it doesn't align with the company's business objectives. And so sometimes those lines can get a little bit blurred.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it's bad, but that's just part of learning. It's part about coming up. And again, going back to, we have leaders that are struggling to communicate with people because communication is different now than it ever has been. So it gets a little challenging.
Okay. And picking up on that last point, communication is different. Is that harping back to the fact that we have different technology, or how do you see communication being different?
I think communication is different because people are communicating more through technology rather than one-on-one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So thank you for expanding on all of that. Coming back to dysfunctional behaviors, entitlement is one of them. And it's probably a more benign one, even though it's annoying than some other behaviors. Are there any other behaviors that you think are worth mentioning that you see as significant trends that are impacting on workplaces right now?
Yeah. So this kind of goes into the leadership and it goes into the employees. And one of the things that I've seen, um, where I think we've got an opportunity is that one of the things that happen, and a lot of people can experience this. We see it on social media. If you're like a self-proclaimed 11 o'clock TikToker who just like watches the world at 11 o'clock at night, flipping on the, like I do. One of the things that I see is that there's this constant demand when there's communication. If it's not in like a high performing team environment, what happens is that I see more commonly than not is that people are having communication and they're trying to win the conversation, right? There's a lot of
Really?
interruption. Oh yeah, there's a lot of interruption. Let me tell you something. You've been in retail for as long as I have. You will learn that people are trying to always win the conversation. It's, we see people coming in and I come from a background where customer service is paramount,
Yeah.
absolutely paramount. My grandfather was a hardware man, the number one hardware store in the world, and Cotter and Cotter and Company, True Value Hardware, number one store for running 12 years. Believe it or not, was in Hawaii. Yeah, you wouldn't think so, but it
Okay.
was on multiple awards, and the biggest reason is his focus on customer service. It
Yeah.
was never about the retailer being right. It was always about how can we best serve you. And I remember specifically my grandfather telling me the story. He had a woman, her name also was Brenda, and this guy came in. It was like 1982, came in, he had a shovel, and the handle was clearly snapped in half. So he comes walking up and he said, "This thing's broken." She goes, "Well, no kidding, you broke it." And because it's a lot to break a shovel like that. I
Yeah.
mean, that's some serious torque, right? So she said, I can't take this back. My grandfather was in earshot of her, and he said, Brenda, please go ahead. Sir, we're going to go ahead and issue you a credit. You can go ahead and spend it in the store. She got so angry at him. She goes, Dana, she goes, he's taking advantage of you. Why would you allow him to do something like that? He said, that man spends $75,000 a year in the store. The last thing I'm worried about is a $5 shovel.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah, that's good business. That's great business, right?
Mhm.
And so a lot of people thought that my grandfather had this like ridiculous mindset that he was getting taken advantage of. What they didn't see were the numbers like he saw. He didn't see the clientele. He didn't see the client accounts, so they didn't see it. He saw it, right? So his version of customer service is that, yes, we understand that sometimes customers come in and they do things that are a little off. But you know what? In the grand scheme of things, and this is where I think leadership is not always in a position to communicate the grand scheme of things. They're not always in a position to communicate the deep inside information. That sometimes what happens is that employees will take a look at what's going on and they'll make their own assessment of the situation and therefore they make their own determination. It's my
Mm.
number one live and die rule in life. In the absence of information, people make stuff up. We
Yeah,
have
that
to
is
make
true.
Yeah, we have to, right? Because we're not comfortable with the ambiguity. And if you've ever heard two people kind of like getting into a fight together, or one person talking about it's like, oh, this person's saying this because I know how he thinks about me and I know what's going on in his head. And it's like, well, do you have an amplifier in there? Because I don't know what's going on in his head. So we make up this story, right? And what happens is that we walk into a conversation believing that that's what it actually is, when in fact, we're probably really wrong. Like if you think Bob is thinking something of you, Bob could be just simply having a bad day,
I think
you
that's
know?
very true. We do leap to
Yeah.
conclusions. And I think it's interesting to note you're linking some of the generational differences to this dysfunction or this trend. And it is fairly dysfunctional to try and win every conversation. And I'm imagining that's because we see a lot of polarized conversations. It's always
Yes.
like my opinion versus your opinion, as opposed
Yes.
to zooming out and seeing the big picture, as you suggest, and putting that incident or that issue in context. And
Yes.
so, is that an age thing or is it a generational thing?
I think it's a cultural thing.
Okay.
I think we see it across all cultures, all ages. Um, and in all individuals. There are people in this world that the only way that they can feel validated is to win an argument.
Mm-hmm.
We have people that how they feel validated is walking away from one. Everybody's got whatever that trigger is inside of them. Everybody is so unique. And I use this word not as a bad thing. I actually use it as a positive. Everybody's a snowflake because snowflakes are so individual. You can never, ever, ever replicate a real snowflake. You can't. No two snowflakes are ever alike, right? So here we are in this world of 8 billion people. We all come from different places. We all have different experiences. We were all grown up differently. We all have different views of authority. We have different pieces of education. We've some of us have grown up in an amazingly supportive environment, and then there are people that are like not even recognized as human beings we all have it. So we all look through the world through this lens, right? And I have one of my favorite mentors. I heard him say this, and I thought it was brilliant. If you take a lemon and you hold it in your hand and you put on a pair of blue glasses and you're looking at the lemon, what color is the lemon?
Is it orange?
Green.
It's
Some
green.
people would say green. You can say orange.
Like blue,
That's
yellow,
great.
green. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
blue and yellow is green,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Got it.
But in all reality, the lemon still remains yellow. It's just how we view the lemon through our glasses, right?
Mhm.
So we mix that with all these other things that we're talking about. Changing technology, approaches to communication, how we see the world, our prior experiences, the fact that we are so innately unique and different from each other, we're going to have things that don't always settle well. We're going to have people that perceive the world one way and somebody else perceives it a different way, right?
So,
So,
Brenda, you've mentioned a couple of things to help decode these behaviors. We've got where are
yes,
they in their, which generation are they from, is another
yeah.
one, is one way of decoding that. One, and that sort of speaks to their communication style. It also speaks to their expectations. What are some other factors you use to decode people and their behaviors?
You could get really deep into the weeds on this, but even just where they are geographically, even within the United States. So when I was back in Hawaii, living in Hawaii, when I moved to the mainland, I was moving from Hawaii back to the Chicagoland area. I was actually moving to the Chicagoland area to live for the first time. I was originally from Pennsylvania. And I had this one guy comes up to me. He's never left the island a day in his life. The man was like 55 years old. Seriously, stayed on a rock in the middle of the Pacific his entire life. He comes walking up to me. He says, "Hey, sis," he says, "I hear you leaving." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Where you stay?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to go move to Chicago." He goes, "Oh, Chicago, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Oh, right next to Vegas." Like, close. You know?
Not
Like,
close.
perception of his world, right? Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So the big thing is that I think where leadership, and this is my humble opinion because I've done this, I've made this mistake, and I've learned the hard way that if you try and quote unquote manage somebody differently to a different set of standards, you lose yourself as a leader. And I've made that mistake. I lost who I was. You can still hold people. This was the biggest lesson that I learned. You can still hold people to the same expectations, but your approach to them is what matters. So if I'm dealing with somebody who I know is a very direct speaker like myself, I have a business partner, we just lay it on the line. We're not hiding anything. Sometimes our sometimes there's an F-bomb that drops and that's okay. We're okay with that, right? But we have a mutual understanding about how we communicate. We don't dance around. We don't try and soften the blow. We just lay it out there. Now, there are other individuals that I work with where I have to think for a minute. If I'm going to lay out the same expectation that I have with them when I do business, I have to take a different approach, but it's still the same expectation. So sometimes it's not so much about what you say, but how you say it that can
Okay.
make the difference. And so leaders can use the same expectations setting, set the same expectation, but your approach to it might be a little bit different. One of the other things too that I learned is that when you have to have a difficult conversation with somebody, let's say, for example, you have to hold somebody accountable for something, you're going to run into interference because nobody likes to get into trouble. Nobody wants to feel like they're getting into trouble. Nobody wants to be made wrong. One of the best phrases I have ever learned that has cut through so much drama, even with some of the largest and greatest narcissistic behavior I have ever up against, has
Ooh,
been "help me understand."
I love
Because
that.
that phrase, "help me understand," does not address the person, it addresses the situation. And so you neutralize the person from the situation. And in essence, what we're doing is that we're actually having an adult conversation, but we're the ones when we use that kind of really strong, yeah, that strong ego neutral language, we're the ones leading the charge on it. And so we're setting the tone for the conversation. And the only thing that you can truly control is yourself. So when I have somebody who's going round and round in circles about, what happened and they're not really answering the question, I can say, "Okay, I hear what you're saying, but help me understand," and then rephrase the question again. If they can't articulate it, then you know what you've got is drama. If they can articulate it, now you got something to work with.
Can you explain that a little bit? If they can't articulate the problem, it's drama. Why? Is that because they're just hyped up on the emotion? They can't settle on the
Yes.
issue?
Yes. Yes, you nailed it. Yeah,
Okay.
they can't settle on because what is going on in them, their emotion, their ire, their anger, their fear, or whatever it is that's coming out, is what's important to them. And if they can't focus in on what the actual situation is, like Tuesday morning, we had this conversation. An hour later, there was an email sent out about it. If that's articulating what the challenge is, right?
Mhm.
Being very specific. If they come and say, well, it's just I've been trying for months to get all this, and it's all of that. And it's getting back to, Bob's doing this and I can't seem to, okay, so help me understand, how did all of this happen? And all you get is that spin up justification that doesn't give you a clear answer. Like, break it down into details for me. How did this project blow up? How did this person miss this deadline? Help me understand that, right? You're asking for fact. And
Can
if
I
what you get,
toss you a scenario? And I'm curious
yeah,
about how you would respond to it. Because
yes,
as you're
yeah,
talking through
absolutely.
this language, I'm recalling a conversation with a leader who had challenges with a particular staff member who was a deflector and a blamer. And
Yes.
they were a manipulator,
Yep.
if you like. And so, in having the conversation with the staff member who had not completed their role effectively and had dropped the ball on a major project, so clearly something for accountability, they had a conversation with them. They said, well, it's actually Susan. Susan isn't really up to the task. And it's like, well, that is your job. And they just went, nope, it's Susan. Just completely
Yeah.
denied and blamed the other person where it was clearly their responsibility. What do you do with something like that?
I would ask him another question. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say, why do you believe that is?
Why do you believe that it's Susan's job?
Yes.
Well, I'm trying to channel what they would say,
That's a
because
good
it
question.
is.
That's the essence of the question, right?
Yeah.
So when you have somebody that is deflecting and they're manipulative, right? When you ask these questions that require them to give a solid factual answer, they're going to struggle with it. Now, I'm
Mm.
not saying this to put them on the spot. I'm not saying this to, you know, cast judgments against them. These are also questions that you can use to really kind of help gauge, do I have a real issue here? In other words, do I have a factual issue? Do I have a logistical issue? Do I have an operational issue? Or do I just have a person issue?
Mm. And how often
Right?
is it a person issue?
It kind of depends. If you have if you have individuals, like every team is going to have a percentage of people that are very high drama. Um, you'll see this a lot. You'll see this a lot in like high sales performers, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are highly influential in what they do, which is really great. They know how to talk their way through things. And what happens is when they have a lot of successes, well, there's a risk that their ego can inflate slightly, right? And I'm like being really nice right now because it can happen.
Sure.
Yeah, or if you have somebody that has a lot of wins and never fails, right?
Yeah.
Then what happens is they get very secure and it's an unrealistic temporary situation. They haven't learned that lesson yet. So when you run into something like that, and then we are starting to call them out for real things that are going on, they're going to struggle because what's going to jump up first is this identity that is now at risk. And that's what somebody who has narcissistic tendencies is all about. Is that not only is somebody who is a narcissist is afraid to fail, they're also afraid to be called out as a failure because there's such an attachment to identity,
Mm.
right? So when you have somebody that's deflecting, you have somebody that's manipulating, when you have somebody that's throwing blame on somebody else, that's an indicator that they're trying to protect this fragile sense of self that's in front of them.
Mm.
And they're
I
really
get
being
that
confronted about it.
diagnosis. What do you do with that?
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. If you got somebody that you can work with, and what I mean by that is if you have somebody who is constantly deflecting a blame, look, they're not going to buy in
Mm.
to what you're putting down. So you have to get creative on how you work with them. They still need to be held to account. They still need to be responsible. You still need to have trust for them. So one of the things that you can do is you can actually give them something that they're good at so that they get a win. And that'll kind of temper things out. But the when you're running into somebody like this, they're always going to respond to life like that because it's just how they operate.
Mm.
So if you
Mm.
give them something that is a win, things that they're capable of doing, you're not appeasing anything. What you're actually doing is reinforcing that you know that they can do elements of this job
So I
because
think
they want to fit in too. They want to fit in too.
that was an element of this particular scenario where they were actually competent in a number of different areas, but
Hmm.
not competent and deflecting in a whole bunch of others. And to hide that area where they were not competent or were disinterested in their job, they blamed other people. And then they also were a bit of a what's the word? Gaslighter. So they would tear down their colleagues behind the scenes as well. So they would make
Yeah,
everybody else feel insecure, like they were going
yeah,
nuts because, like, oh God, was it my responsibility to do that? And that's sort of kind of all part of the same drama based type thing. So everybody else is incompetent, failing at their job, and they're the one whose poop doesn't smell.
exactly. And guess what starts to show up? A little bit of
Poop.
entitlement.
Oh, entitlement.
Yeah, poop too. Right? But no, but now we've got this perception this person feels very entitled,
Yeah.
right? So it's like they think that they can only do it. And basically what it is, honestly, at the end of the day, is you got somebody that likely is no longer a fit for the team.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was what ended up happening is that
Yeah.
they were destructive and weren't willing or able to take on any constructive feedback or any pointing out that they were not fulfilling their role and just
Yeah.
completely denied and deflected. So when you have that, it's like your version of reality is not matching this reality. Um, it's
And you can only fix, you can do something with that. You can't fix the person. You can't fix their mindset. All
yeah,
you can do is just fix the position.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Brenda,
I
are you
know.
ready?
You said rabbit hole. We weren't kidding.
I know, I know. I'm sorry. So
And it's all good. No, that is fine.
are you ready for the
I
fast
am.
three?
I am. Oh, yes, go for it. Hit me.
All right. What is the future technology you most want right now?
AI that is accurate.
Yeah.
AI is still learning. I mean, and I love it. I love Chat GPT. I use it all the time. I'm dyslexic, so it actually helps me pull my thoughts together in a way that I mean, it makes me sound brilliant, and I love that part of it. But yeah, but sometimes it's like off. Like,
Yeah. It just makes up
yeah,
stuff.
you need a little work here. Yeah.
Okay. What's number two? What's the best tip you ever got for leadership?
What was the best what?
Tip that you ever got for leadership?
Oh, in the absence of information, people make stuff up. That actually came from one of my old bosses, and he used to say that to me all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a good thing to keep in mind. Assumptions and uncertainty causes people to just make stuff up. Okay.
Yeah,
Number
when it
three.
comes to communication, that's exactly what I hang on to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Question number three. What are you reading or listening to right now?
Oh, interesting enough. I'm reading The Psychology of Money.
Oh,
I just
really?
happen to have it right here. Yeah, it's by Morgan Housel, and it's really good. I just got into it, and there's a really awesome part about Bill Gates, a story about Bill Gates and his good friend Kent when they were 13 years old in Lakeland College or Lakeland High School. They were the only two kids that really got into using computers and technology. Bill Gates went on to be what everybody knows Bill Gates to be too. Unfortunately, his friend Kent, equally intelligent. We were talking about luck. Was it luck and risk? Equally intelligent individual, completely like-minded, had just as much capability as Bill Gates. Unfortunately, he passed away years a couple before he even graduated from high school from a fallen mountaineering.
Oh,
So yeah, it just kind of talks about that, as we look at risk, we have this pretty wild mindset about money and how we look at our finances and finances of other people, right? And so we have to really kind of embrace this mindset that um, luck and risk, that one person is going to be on one side of this and the other person is going to be. We can come from exactly the same place, and yet not everything's going to be equal. So it's that's just how it started off. So I'm pretty interested in it.
Okay, that's one to put on the to be read pile. And that
Yeah,
was the Fast Three.
the fast three. There you go.
Okay, Brenda, is there anything I haven't asked that you'd like to answer that will help complete the conversation?
I'll tell you what. Um, Probably the one thing that I get asked is when I'm talking about those questions, right? Help me understand and why do you believe that is? I actually have something, with your permission, if it's okay, I can share with everybody. I actually give those away for free in a free course. Doesn't
Great.
cost anything. Yeah, there's actually three phrases that I have learned that will help people really kind of cut through the drama. It'll also become part of your almost everyday vernacular. And they're so effective that it just gets you where you need to go. So how you find that is if you go to my website at yobrenda.com, because I have a very complicated last name. So we just make it simple, yobrenda.com. And you put in your name, you put in your email address, and then tell me the one thing that you heard in this episode that really just kind of wowed you, and you'll have access to the site. In addition to that, there's also a handout that you can print that if you want to, like if you're running into a situation and you know you're going to have a hard conversation with somebody, you can go back and watch that one little segment about that one phrase, and you don't have to go through and watch the whole thing again. So it's a tool that allows you to actually have it handy in case you actually need it going into some of these, because some of these conversations are just like insanely difficult. And as
Yeah.
somebody like me who's at a level of mastery with them, I still feel the emotion. I still feel the frustration. I still am at risk of getting hung up. I just know what tools I can fall back on that will give me a couple minutes to kind of get creative and think through it. Doesn't mean that it makes those problems go away. Just makes you more effective at getting through them.
Fantastic. So we got help me understand, why do you believe that is? And you've got a third one. What's your third one?
You have to take the course for that one.
Is that a secret, did you say?
It's a secret. Yeah, you got to take the course for the third one.
I love it. What a tease. Brenda, this has been fantastic. Now we know we can go to yobrenda.com. And where else can people find you on the web?
You can also find me. I'm on all the social media. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. You can find my podcast episodes. I go live Monday through Friday on those channels as well. And I give little nuggets of information about really how to build your skill set in dealing with difficult people. And we start breaking down the situations as to why things happen, how to navigate through them. And so this is not an easy thing to get. This is not an overnight fix. It's you're talking about constant skill building when it comes to dealing with different people. And we've got another rising generation that's coming up and we don't know anything about them just yet. So
That's
yeah,
terrific. What's the name of your podcast?
solving people problems.
Love it. Solving people problems. And we will put a note to that in the show notes for people. Brenda, this has
Thank you.
been fabulous. I love talking all things people stuff. It's been a delight to hear your insights, your wealth of wisdom, and your observations of the patterns of what we're seeing in the workplace. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's Read to Lead. And let me show you what's on my reading list this week. It's Snakes in Suits. Snakes in Suits. Great title. The subtitle is Understanding and Surviving the Psychopaths in Your Office. Woo. It's by Paul Babiak and Robert D. Hare. Maybe you've read it. And the title attracted me as I'm working on power games. And I never wanted to believe there was that many psychopaths and narcissists in the workplace. But the research shows that out of a group of 100, you'll have 1 to 4 people who fit into that category. So chances are we're going to have to deal with them. And it's some of the things that I address in my book, Power Games, that is coming out via Kickstarter next year in 2025, somewhere around May. So I'm looking forward to seeing what these authors have to say about how we can contend with these people who don't play by the normal social norms, who play outside and really cause havoc for us. So there we have it. Snakes in Suits. Well, that's it for the show this week. I do hope you enjoyed the rich conversation we had about dealing with difficult people and the challenging the challenging things that we have to contend with and what we can do in order to address some of the behaviors. It's a really rich, deep conversation. And unfortunately, it's something that most leaders and most people in the workplaces have had to deal with. If you did enjoy the show, please subscribe. Just click subscribe on whatever app you're watching or listening to. Sign up on my website to get the podcast insider resource rich extras that come with every episode, including an implementation checklist, discussion questions, and interesting factoids to make you look smart at the parties or just smart in general. And drop me an email. Let me know what you're thinking of the show and any recommendations you might have, either for books or for guests, or what you think of the show in general. Zoe@zoerath.com, or hit me up on any of the socials. This makes it more of a conversation and makes it more exciting for me to produce the show for you every week. Well, it's exciting anyway, but it'd be nice to hear from you. In the meantime, live with grace, lead in service, live well, lead well.